Hey, this video goes out to the historical revisionists over at Red Elephants. There's a video featured on the Red Elephants Facebook page that is claiming that the Irish built America. Now, I wasn't going to watch the video at first because I was just going to dismiss it. But I got a little curious and I watched the video, and I'm kind of glad that I did, because the absolute and utter BS that came out of this video is truly astounding. The first point I want to address is the fact that the Irish, while they did contribute greatly to the culture of the United States, they essentially were Johnny-come-latelys to this situation. By the time the Irish got here in any significant amount, the black slaves had already established a 200-plus year foundation of wealth in this country. The Irish did not start coming here in great numbers until the 1840s, and it continued on from there to grow. But by the time they started coming here, the wealth was already here. In the 1840s, the United States was already producing most of the cotton consumed on the world market. That cotton was grown by slaves. The Irish had absolutely nothing to do with, or very little to do with, the establishment of the wealth in this country. And just to demonstrate how late the Irish were to this party, let's look back at some of the institutions that already existed by the time the Irish got here. Most of your Ivy League colleges were started by, financed with, and maintained through the labor of slaves that were on the campuses, of alumni, of the college presidents and other college officers. All of those colleges, such as Georgetown, Yale, Dartmouth, Harvard, all of them were funded mainly through the labor of slaves. Just to give an example, Georgetown University made so much money from the labor of slaves that they did not charge tuition for their first 40 years in existence. 40 years. That was Georgetown University. They did not have to charge tuition because their slaves were so profitable. Getting away from that, you also have insurance companies such as Aetna, who is still around today, who insured the lives of slaves as they were coming across the Atlantic. You have Brooks Brothers, well-known clothing manufacturer, make fine clothes. How did they get their start? They started out making clothes for slaves. New York Life, another insurance company that's around today, insured the lives of slaves. So, the wealth in this country was not built by the Irish. The wealth in this country was built on the backs of slaves. J.P. Morgan, another company that we all know and love to hate, they accepted slaves as collateral on loans. So, lots of money being made on the backs of millions of people who were forced into the system that we now know as American slavery. This video featured on Red Elephants it's a joke. It's a joke. I'm not discounting the contributions of the Irish, but I am going to call into question the fact that this guy featured in this video is making the absolutely false claim that the Irish built the United States of America. The Irish, as I said earlier, came very late to this party. There was a 2-century head start that was created by black slaves that built the immense wealth that this country used to finance the building of America by the Irish. Notice most of the companies that I named were based in the North. They were based in New England. They were based in New York City. Without the money made from insuring slaves and taking slaves as collateral for loans, the insuring of the ships that brought the slaves to the United States of America, there is no wealth. There is no America for the Irish to build. The Irish, while they did contribute, did not build this country. They came very late, after the foundation had been laid by black slaves, after the money had been made by mostly northern firms who engaged in the insurance and mortgaging of the lives of slaves, as well as southern plantations. The history bears this out. It doesn't matter how you look at it. The Irish were not responsible for the building of the wealth in the United States. The math doesn't add up. You guys weren't here from the beginning. You want to talk about, Irish white slaves. You weren't slaves. You're indentured servants. Do me a favor. Check out Bacon's Rebellion. After Bacon's Rebellion, which consisted of an uprising of poor whites and black slaves, the few black slaves that were here. After that took place, the idea of Irish slaves in America disappeared. After that, it was black slaves. That was it. There were no white slaves in America after Bacon's Rebellion, because that would have upset the racial hierarchy that had already started being built here. So I say to red elephants and all those who are in such lockstep with this absolutely fanciful idea that somehow the Irish built the United States of America, I say this to you. All of you are dead wrong. The history bears it out. You are all dead wrong. While the Irish contributed, they didn't build this country. They came into a situation that was already well established by black slaves helping the United States, well, not necessarily helping, being forced to create millions and millions, perhaps billions of dollars worth of wealth for the North, for the South, for really the entire world, because the world was consuming Southern cotton, grown not by Irish slaves, being grown by black slaves. The money generated from the slave trade was not simply in cotton. It wasn't simply in tobacco. It spread out in a web, starting in West Africa, getting on the ships, which were insured by Northern and British insurance firms. They get over here. They are now, the owners of these slaves are now borrowing money from Northern banks to purchase land, to purchase more slaves, who are then further mortgaged. And these mortgages are held by Northern banks, by British banks. So, no, the Irish did not build America. The Irish were a bunch of Johnny-come-latelys that were inserted into a situation that already existed. I hate to break up this little party that you guys are throwing for yourselves, but you all were, like everyone else in this country at the time, you all were standing on the backs and shoulders of millions of black slaves who came here before you and laid the foundation of the wealth of the United States of America. By the 1840s, by the time you guys decided to show up in force, the work was already done. The heavy lifting, literal heavy lifting, had already been done. You came over into a ready-made situation. You came into a country that had already been established. The wealth of the nation had already been established by black slaves. And you guys, like everyone else, just you took advantage of that. No, were you in the greatest situation? No. The Irish that came here were desperately poor. Many times. But you were desperately poor. You weren't slaves. If you ran away from the factory that you were employed in because you didn't like the conditions, no one sent dogs after you. The fugitive slave law didn't apply to you. There was no fugitive Irishman law. No one was coming after you. You got to make your own fortune in whatever city you happened to end up in after you left. That wasn't the case for black slaves. Black slave escapes, the full force of the federal government came down on them until they were found. So you can't tell me that the Irish built this country, because it's simply not true. The country was already built. The wealth of this country had already been founded, and it was not founded by the Irish. It wasn't founded by the Germans. It wasn't founded by the Spanish. It was founded by the blood, sweat, and tears of black slaves. The history backs me up. Look at it for yourself. But hey, you're welcome to your fantasy, but just know that I'm not falling for the bullshit. And there are millions of others like me who are also not falling for the bullshit, because that is exactly what you're putting out when you make this absolutely ridiculous claim that the Irish built America. You guys came late to the party. The foundation was already laid, and you had absolutely zero to do with it.